Hi friends! It's been a couple of weeks, but it's finally video time again. I am so excited to be back. So Christmas is just Christmas. It's a bit stressful. It's a bit stressful getting finished up at work, and then I was doing Christmas dinner, and so yeah, just there were no videos. Also, I was behind schedule. I was filming, planning, editing, posting all on the same day, so we're rolling it back a little bit, getting back on schedule, and I wanted to start 2024 with 2024 books. 2024 books? 24 books that I would like to read in 2024. So some of these are series that I would like to continue, so books or series that I would like to read in 2024. So there's actually more than 24 books. So we will be keeping it going sharpish in this video. It could get incredibly long if I spend too long speaking about each one. So we're gonna make it snappy. I can't click with my right hand. Can't click. What is my issue? Anyway, it's the start of a new year and I've got so many books that I want to read. Some of them I've already started, so let's just jump right in. The first book that I want to read in 2024, you can see I have already started. This is Elastic Habits by Stephen Guise. So a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, I hit my obsessed with self-help book stage. We've all been there, we've all done it. I am a recovering self-help addict. I try to confine it to a couple of books a year now. I am reading Atomic Habits again for the third year in a row. However, I find Atomic Habits to be a little bit rigid in its ideology and its structure. I think it does have useful information. It's got information that I have applied to my own life successfully. However, I have started reading this already, and already it speaks to me a lot more. It speaks to me as a lazy person who wants the absolute minimal way to do things and get results. So Elastic Habits is based on the idea of, rather than having this rigid, I'm going to do X every single day, you have 3 different options, say for your exercise habit, and then 3 different levels for each of those options. So every day you have 9 ways that you can win and complete your habit. So it's leveraging the idea of freedom and choice, which is a little bit lacking in a lot of your standard habit advice, and helping you to maintain a streak even on your low energy days, which for me, that is incredibly important because I zigzag wildly between very high energy and very low energy, and something to keep me going in the low energy times, very much welcome. So I'm already about halfway through this. I started it this morning, so I'm quite enjoying that already. Book number 2, I do not own a physical copy yet, but it is A Stranger in Alandria by Sofia Samatar. Now, I've mentioned, I think a couple of times, this Guardian list. I went and looked it up again. It was the top 10 fantasy books of the 21st century. They all have quite a heavy, or maybe not a heavy, but they all have a focus on non-European elements, with the idea being that, you know, kind of traditional white Western European based fantasy, while still very popular, is not the only way to do fantasy. And so this is kind of a list of books that bring in other mythologies, other countries, outside influences. I was particularly interested in this one because apparently one of the themes is the influence of writing on a purely oral culture. I thought that was quite interesting. It's set in a secondary world, and it's also meant to reflect the author's experience of living across different cultures with an American mother and a Somali immigrant father, and also being a scholar of Arabic literature. So I found that quite interesting. It's been on my TBR for quite a while now, probably over a year, so I would like to cross it off the list in 2024. Another series that was on that same article was the Dominion of the Fallen series by Aliette de Bodard. I have read the first 2. There's more than 3 books, but there's 3 as sort of the central trilogy. I've read the first 2, which were The House of Shattered Wings and The House of Binding Thorns. The House of Shattered Wings I really enjoyed. Binding Thorns I found a little bit slow. maybe I'm struggling to remember. I don't know if it was that the plot wasn't as engaging or that I didn't connect as much with the characters in this second book, but I still would like to finish the series, so it's on my list for 2024. This series is set in a Paris that has been ravaged by a magical war, and in the wake of this we have these different houses which are headed by Fallen, with a capital F. These are fallen angels that wield incredible power, but you also have an Eastern influence. One of the main characters is Vietnamese and brings with him Vietnamese mythology, but there's also other kind of immigrant elements from Vietnam within Paris, and that reflects the author's own joint culture, being of French and Vietnamese descent, but she writes primarily in English. So more fantasy. I would also like to continue the Gentleman Bastards series in 2024. I have read The Lies of Loch Lamora before. I am reading it again. I've just started just because I want to remind myself before I read the other two. I did really enjoy this the first time that I read it. Rereading it and sort of analysing the writing and the world building is quite interesting. I think Scott Lynch has a lot of skill in that regard. I do think the first book, at least as far as I remember, it suffers from the same issue that a lot of male written fantasy suffers from, and it's a lack of meaningful female characters. Now, I will put my hands up if I am remembering incorrectly, but I only remember 3 and they all died. So I have heard that there is a pirate captain, a middle-aged pirate captain, mother of 2, coming up in, I believe, the second book. So maybe Scott's not as guilty as I am pegging him for, but I am looking forward to reading them again and seeing how I feel about them a couple of years after reading the first one. The next fantasy series that I want to continue is the Cities of the Weft. I believe it's going to be a trilogy by Alex, and by Alex I don't know how to pronounce his second name, Phoebe? Alex Phoebe, let's call him that. Although, like with The Gentleman Bastards, I'm rereading the first one. I really want to reread Morju because it's been a couple of years, and it does very handily include a review at the beginning of the main points of the plot of the first book. Very handy, thank you for that. However, it was a long book. It was just as big as this one. And I feel like I'm missing bits if I don't go back and reread the whole thing. Or maybe that's just my completionist nature. So I'll try not to spoil anything of the first one, but the series is set in another secondary world as far as I can tell. The first book is set in the city of Morju, where basically God is dead. This is revealed in the blurb of the first book, so I don't consider that a spoiler. God is dead and the Master of Morju is using God's corpse to fuel his own powers, but it also creates some strange side effects like the living mud, which strange little creatures are born from. And your main character is Nathan Treves, who lives in the slums, and to start with he is trying to get money for his dad's medicine. His dad is dying of lungworm, which sounds horrific, I have to say. But he also has this power called the Spark, which his father keeps telling him not to use. And I mean, there you go, classic fantasy setup. It was right up my street because it's the kind of fantasy that I know and I'm familiar with, but with enough of a twist to make it feel fresh and interesting and not just the same thing over again. The first one did end quite unexpectedly, and I am very interested to see what happens next. But I may go back and read Morju first, so that's possibly another 2 massive books on my 2024 TBR. More fantasy next. I do promise there is more than just fantasy on this list, but it's kind of front loaded. That is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. So I have been enjoying quite a lot of fairy tale, not necessarily retellings, but fairy tale inspired books recently. And I thought, why not continue that with Stephen King? He's obviously most known for his horror novels, but I have read some of his fantasy novels. I read the first in the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger. It was good, I never really got round to reading the rest of the series. I also read one of his quite older fantasies, which is The Eyes of the Dragon. But at the time that was the kind of fantasy that I was into, that kind of classic fantasy, kings and wizards and dragons and all that kind of stuff. To be honest, don't really know what happens in this. I've not really read the blurb. It doesn't give you much. It's about a boy called Charlie. He's 17. He's in high school. He meets an old man who dies and leaves him something, and then presumably magic happens. So yeah, I'm on board for that. Okay, something that's not fantasy, which is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So obviously I studied English literature, but it was British English literature essentially that we did. I think there were some classes in later years, elective classes on American literature. I did do one, I think. I read a little bit of Herman Melville, but I haven't read The Great Gatsby, and I kind of feel like I'm missing out on just a huge part of pop and literary culture by not being familiar with the story. So I got this second hand. It's nice and short, so I'm just looking forward to seeing what it's all about after all these years. Don't really know that much about it, just that it's set in the Roaring 20s in America. It's about rich people, and it's a bit of an expose on the Jazz Age, I think, according to the blurb. So interested to read that one as well. The next book that I want to read in 2024 is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have read one other Kazuo Ishiguro book, which was The Remains of the Day. It was a few years ago. I don't remember a whole lot about it. It was about a butler who's going to meet up with a woman who used to work in the house that he works in, and that's about all I remember, really. I think I enjoyed it though. This sounds really good. So this is speculative fiction, I believe. Clara is a artificial friend who is waiting in a store for someone to come and choose her, which already, this sounds like it could be heartbreaking. Now, I like to go into books knowing as little as possible. I'll read the blurb. I should maybe do my research more because I'm a wee bit sensitive, but we're going to go in blind. Hopefully it doesn't make me cry. But it does say on the back that Clara is warned not to invest too much in the promises of humans. So, I possibly foresee some tears. So this is Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. I heard about this book for the first time when I was at university. We had a lecture on post-colonial literature, which I thought was just really interesting as a concept, like the subject of the British Empire writing back against the literature of empire which they'd been forced to study. The lecture included a quote, I believe it was from Stuart Hall, basically saying how he knew about daffodils from the poem by Wordsworth, you know, I wandered lonely as a cloud, even though they were not native to Jamaica and he'd never seen one, but he didn't know the names of the actual native Jamaican plants where he'd grown up. So I found that very interesting. This is based on one of my favourite Victorian Gothic novels of all time, which is Jane Eyre, one of my favourite classic novels of all time. So I would be interested in it just as a retelling, but also this is from the perspective of Rochester's mad wife in the attic, who's not really a character in the original novel. She's just a plot device. She's just there to put an obstacle in the way of Jane and Rochester being together. So I thought it was quite interesting to look at it from her point of view and look at the way that characters from the colonies are treated in novels of that time. So that lecture was a good 10 years ago now, but I finally got around to buying it. It's not very long, and so it's going on the 2024 TBR. Another fantasy fairy tale series that I want to continue in 2024 is the Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden. I have finished the first one, which is The Bear and the Nightingale. I don't have my copies of the other two yet, but they are on the way. As you can see, I started tabbing this and then I just got completely sucked in and I did not tab anything. I finished it, I think, in 2 sittings over, it couldn't have been much more than a 24-hour period. This is a very good book. It's not a 5-star, it was, I think I gave it 4, it might even be a 4.5. What she just does so well is atmosphere. I love her writing, I love the atmosphere. This felt like gathering round the fire on a cold winter's night to hear a story, which is exactly what happens at the beginning of the book. They all gather round in the kitchen to hear the nurse tell a story, and yeah, it's just delicious. I really enjoyed it. So we're coming into winter properly now. I'm excited to get the other 2 books. My friend has read them. She keeps telling me that I have so much to come, that there's so much for me to experience, so I'm ready for it. Next up is the Book of Dust. Well, it will be a trilogy. I think the 3rd book in the trilogy I read recently is meant to be published in 2024. I did get this one for Christmas a couple of years ago. As you can see, my bookmark is incredibly close to the end, and for some reason I just did not finish it. So I vaguely remember what happens. I'm not just going to read the end, I am going to reread the whole book. The 2nd one is out. I have just reread Northern Lights, the 1st book in the His Dark Materials trilogy, and I probably will reread the other 2. They're not in this video, but they can get an honourable mention as books that I'll probably be rereading this year. And it just reminded me, those are some of my favourite books of all time. I've mentioned that in a few of my videos now. I read them when I was 12 years old. They were incredibly formative. I love them, I love them, I love them. That's not to say that they don't have flaws, but honestly, I just cannot see them. I can't see them. So this is set before the His Dark Materials trilogy, when Lyra is a baby. And so this is La Belle Sauvage, the 1st in the Book of Dust trilogy. The 2nd instalment is The Secret Commonwealth, which is set after, when Lyra's about 20 years old and she's an undergraduate. And I'm not sure about the 3rd one. I don't believe that has a title yet, although it is pretty much finished being written. So if the 3rd one's about to come out, what better year to reread the 1st one, pick up the 2nd, and get myself ready to read that when it releases. So I love when you see a book that is simultaneously in one creator's video of their best books of the year and is in another creator's video of their worst books of the year. That just really intrigues me and it makes me want to pick it up. So the next book on my list is Idol Burning by Rin Usami, which is translated by Asa Yoneda from the Japanese. I don't really know too much about it, to be honest. I know it's about a girl/woman who develops an obsession with a male idol. I find idol culture, not just in Japan, but just in East Asia in general, really fascinating. I really enjoy K-pop just myself. I'm not really super into the artists as people, I enjoy the songs. But the kind of parasocial relationship that the idols have with their fans, the way that their lives are kind of controlled, their romantic relationships, because that love is supposed to be kept available so that the fans can imagine that it's for them. And it's also a little bit disturbing at times, particularly in some stories that you hear about male fans and young female idols. So a book about that kind of intrigues me. I'm also just super into anything Japanese culture. I'm just your garden variety weeb, and this hits a lot of points, so it's also very short. Why not bung it on the TBR for 2024. So one of my favourite books that I read in 2023 was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, because I'm a sheep and I saw everyone was reading it and crying, and I'm basic, and I thought, hey, I'm gonna do that too. So for 2024 I thought I would pop Circe, Madeline Miller's other book, on my TBR. I feel like I am going to prefer The Song of Achilles just because the place in my life that I'm at, the only type of romance that I can really get behind is male-male romance, because there's absolutely no way for me to self-insert with that. Like, if there's a female, and if it's a male-female relationship or a female-female relationship, I can't separate myself from that, whereas if it's 2 men, I'm just like, ah, cool, I'm not involved in that. Even though technically I'm not involved in any of them, but you know, me and romance, we got issues. However, Madeline Miller's writing was just so gorgeous, so beautiful. It's right up my street. I know it's not for everyone. Not everyone likes that incredibly purple prose, but for me, just, yes. Give it to me. I love that kind of poetic imagery, and I think I'm definitely going to enjoy this, if maybe not quite as much as I enjoyed The Song of Achilles. Another short book that I want to read in 2024 is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is one that I saw on a few people's recommendations, and at least one person recommending it particularly as a winter book, because it's set in the run-up to Christmas. Obviously Christmas is now past, kind of missed that window, but it is still winter. It's about a man who discovers some kind of dark goings on. Can't remember if it's a convent or if it's one of these homes for unwed mothers. It's 1985, it's a small community in Ireland. The church has a lot of power, and as we now know, there were a lot of abuses going on. This is a bit of a dangerous one possibly for me to read because, again, I have no emotional distance from the things that I read. I get upset very easily, but it is very short, so at least if it upsets me, it will be over quickly. And I can't live my life just not reading anything that might upset me, because that is like 95% of books. So we will see if it does. I'm interested in the premise, and it's not necessarily a bad thing for books to upset you now and then. It's part of the experience of reading and seeing things through another person's eyes and experiencing another person's life. So this is, you can't read it very well, but this is Evina by Frances Burney. This is a lovely Penguin edition that I got for my Christmas. I have wanted to read this for a number of years, basically ever since I ran out of Jane Austen novels and learned that Frances Burney was a big inspiration and influence on Jane Austen. She has two other novels, Camilla and Cecilia, and Jane Austen directly references Camilla in Northanger Abbey when she's talking about novels. And because Jane Austen was so insensitive as to die with only 6 completed novels, I have to look elsewhere. I don't believe I'm going to fall in love with this in the same way that I did with Jane Austen's novels, purely because it's a little bit older and Jane Austen did a lot for the format. However, I'm interested to see the influence that it had on her and to read more classic novels in that vein from around that time. It's very different reading a classic novel than it is from reading a historical novel, which is always a bit anachronistic and filtered through our modern sensibilities. It can be uncomfortable sometimes reading classic novels. The older I get, the less I can enjoy Mansfield Park. The scenes where they're trying to get Fanny to marry Mr. Crawford, I'm just like, you leave that woman alone. You leave that woman alone. However, I also think it's good to go back and see where our ideas came from. There is nothing new under the sun. We are just always recycling old ideas. The next book is a bit of a non-fiction reference type book. This is 1000 Years of Manga. So I got this for my Christmas last year, 2022. I have not got around to reading it yet. So since I've now had it for a year without opening it, I thought I should put it on the 2024 TBR. Obviously, the person who got this for me knows that I am a weeb, that I love anime, that I love manga, and this is really interesting because it links kind of modern day manga to ancient Japanese culture and temple paintings and shows the connection and the evolution between them. So quite interested to read that. We are getting there. The pile is going down. Another series I would like to continue in 2024 is Heaven Official's Blessing. If you've watched some of my other videos, you may know that I am obsessed, absolutely obsessed with the animated series. The second season will be coming to an end in a few weeks, but this first book is actually the first reading vlog I ever did, the first booktube video I ever did. I had done some other YouTube videos before that. I hadn't really found my niche. This was my first one, and I've been posting regularly about books since then, so thank you. Was the video great? Not really, but it actually did surprisingly well. I think probably because Heaven Official's Blessing is so popular within its niche, and there's maybe not that many creators out there doing reading vlogs on these books. So I actually set my expectations quite high. When I posted my next video and it didn't do as well, I was disappointed. I was also a bit disappointed in the book itself. I don't know if it's the translation. Obviously I don't read or speak Mandarin. I can't go and read the original to compare it to, but I found the translation, it is just the fan translation. As far as I'm aware, it's the fan translation that had been posted online for free. And Seven Seas have just bought the rights to that and published it as it was. I think it could have done with a professional translator and a lot of editing. It feels clunky. It was a bit difficult to read, but I have a very strong emotional connection to the characters. That carried me through, and I did say that I would stick with it until I hit new plot material, because obviously this was the first season of the animated series, This will be the second season of the animated series, so I think I will need to read to like book 3. There are 8 books in total, so I will read at least the next 2, and then I will make a decision on whether I will continue and read the remaining 5. So honestly, I might just wait for the show to get through all the material and only read them if it gets cancelled, but we'll see. The next book on my 2024 TBR is another classic. It is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. You hear a lot about Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, not so much about Anne Bronte. I think because her first book, Agnes Grey, was published alongside Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, if I'm remembering correctly, and was kind of overshadowed by them. And also her second book, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, really offended the sensibilities of the Victorian readers of the time. It's about a woman who has left her husband because he's an alcoholic, because he's abusive, and she is trying to protect her son from that influence, which was obviously very frowned upon in straight-laced Victorian society. You didn't talk about this, and you definitely didn't leave your husband. You just put up with it. So Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre are obviously fantastic. I've also read Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, which was interesting to analyse in a feminist sense, but just as a book wasn't really that interesting to me. It definitely didn't stand up to Jane Eyre. There is a third Bronte sister, the overlooked one, and so I'm interested to start with The Tenant of Wildfell Hall because it was described at the time as coarse and feminist, which obviously that means it's right up my street. The next series I want to read I also don't have physical copies of yet, but it is the Gorman Gast Trilogy by Mervyn Peake. These were published between the mid to late 1940s, early to mid 1950s, or at least the main 3 were. There are 2 other books which aren't part of the kind of core trilogy. Mervyn Peake did see it as part of a wider series, but he did die before he could complete any further books. The main trilogy consists of Titus Groan, Gorman Gast, and Titus Alone. I have previously read Titus Groan. It's a habit. If I go back to a series that I haven't finished and I'm reading later books, I will read the first few books again just to make life hard for myself. So I will reread them all. One thing that really stuck with me from having read the first one was just the imagery that Peake uses. You can tell from reading that he was also a painter. It's just he's painting with words. The books are secondary world fantasy. Again, they are set in this huge gothic crumbling castle of Gormenghast, and just about the inhabitants and the relationships. The sort of main character, Titus, is born at the beginning of the first book, and he's a child growing up, and there's all these kind of intrigues going on around him. Peake sometimes compared to Tolkien, who is his contemporary, but to me the books feel very different. I feel like they come at fantasy from completely different angles. So another of my goals in 2024 is to read more translated works, and so this next book is also a translation. It is Look Who's Back by Timur Vermes, and it is translated by, translator not on the cover, well, at least he's on the title page, Jamie Bullock, translated by Jamie Bullock. So in German this is Er ist wieder da, and I saw this in the second-hand shop. I picked it up because I watched the movie, and the movie was so good, so really darkly funny. So this book asks the question, what would happen if Hitler woke up in modern day Germany? Now, I don't know how much the book differs from the movie, but in the movie Hitler wakes up in Berlin. Everyone thinks that he's an impersonator. He starts gathering a following again, and the movie intersperses scripted and acted moments with kind of Borat style reality TV moments where he goes out and speaks to actual German people and asks them, would you follow me? And some of the responses, oh God. It's very funny, it's very dark. And I'm interested to read the book, see if it does differ from the movie. I would have liked to read it in German, but my German is not great anymore. And I struggle with Harry Potter, so we're reading the translated version. If you haven't watched the movie, I would highly recommend it. It's not on Netflix in the UK anymore, but it'll be on some streaming platform somewhere. If you're looking for something to make you laugh and also question your belief in humanity, then yeah, top marks, give it a go. So now we're moving on to some of the manga that I want to read in 2024. The first series being Yona of the Dawn. I got the first 2 volumes for myself for Christmas. So I watched the anime a few years ago now. I enjoyed it. I think there's only 12 episodes. There's never been a second season. But I saw a couple of people recommending the manga and I thought, okay, well, I want to read more manga. I enjoyed the anime. There's like 30 or 40 volumes out. So when I saw them in the manga shop, I thought, why not? They were also missing volume 1 of pretty much any other series. I think Christmas time, bad time to be trying to start new manga. Volume 1 obviously being the most popular Christmas present. But Yona is 16, she is the only princess of the kingdom, and then tragedy strikes, I believe it's her father's murdered, she goes on the run, and it's all about her adventures. Hopefully one day we will see a second season of the anime, but until then I'm going to give the manga a go. The manga that I've started reading and that I would like to continue in 2024 is Orange. So these are the collected volumes, 1, 2, I'm not sure how many there are in total, but I've read this one, the number 1. And another Christmas present to myself was volume 2. So the story starts with 15-year-old Naho who receives a letter from her future self, which basically says that future Naho wants teenage Naho to help protect this new transfer student Kakeru, who is going to transfer into her class that day, and she wants Naho to protect him from his fate. It's kind of typical anime manga. They're not quite saving the world, but they're doing it with the power of friendship, which is why I love these stories. I couldn't quite give it 5 stars just because some of the themes bring up some feelings about certain things that have happened in my own life, but it is definitely emotional. I did get a bit teary-eyed at times, and I definitely want to see how it turns out. Another manga that I've started and want to continue is Morari the Patriot. So I have the first 5 volumes, I believe there's 19 out, and then it's currently on hiatus. I have read the first 2 volumes already and I can already picture the Sherlock and Moriarty yaoi fanfiction. And honestly, I kind of want to go read it. Because look at them. Look how hot they are, especially this guy. Look how hot Sherlock is. So this is a retelling of the Sherlock Holmes stories, but from the point of view of Moriarty, with Moriarty as a kind of morally grey hero who is using crime to try to right the injustices of such an unequal society where you have the aristocracy and then you have the working class. So you're just trying to use crime to bring about a more egalitarian society. And obviously Holmes is trying to capture him. And I hope they kiss. And if they don't, I might go read some of that fan fiction. I might just do it. So the last series that I want to read in 2024, hopefully there are 24 books and series in this video, hopefully I've counted correctly, but it is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. So this is honestly one of these series that I don't know why I haven't read it yet. I don't know. It's completely up my street. It's iconic. It's a cult classic that has become part of pop culture. It's a style of humour that's really in line with the other things that I know I enjoy. So yeah, I have no idea. I bought the whole series thinking that I was going to start a series of videos on my channel of reading books that I can't believe I haven't read yet, which might still happen, it might not, but I have the books and so I'm going to read them. They're not incredibly long by themselves. There is 5 of them, but I have a whole year. I'm sure I can get through them. And there we have it. A bit of a messy and chaotic return to making videos for me, but I'm excited for a year of reading. I'm excited to get back into the swing of things with making videos. There's some difficult emotions going on still, but we're working with those. It's a new year. I've got goals, I've got plans, but we're trying to keep it small. And really, more than anything, I just want to enjoy this. I just want to enjoy reading books and making videos and talking about them. I'm planning to go to an IRL book club and speak to actual people in the wild. That'll be exciting. So if you're interested in sticking around, please give the video a like, hit the subscribe button, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!